Well, Jun, thank you so much for joining us on the Rising Beyond podcast today.
Thank you so much, Sybil. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I am super excited because it is actually really difficult, one, to find people in this space that really do understand what are the actual implications of domestic violence. Two, that you are male that understands the nuances of domestic violence. And three, you know all the things about money when it comes to divorce and adding those nuances of coercive control and domestic violence. So I am so excited to have you here.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that because I think it's just like a culmination of all the different life experiences that I've had that has led me to this point, being a male, being in this industry, and just knowing what some of the things that go through people's minds, especially in a domestic violence survivor mentality, all the different things that go through their minds, like emotionally, financially, like, oh, but I am excited to share what I have gone through and also some of the other things that I think other people should know when they're going through this exact same situation.
Yeah. And we've talked several times offline, but you are a survivor. And we talked a little bit that, right, 98+% of victims are victim to financial abuse too. And so you being able to offer help and information to not fix per se, but to help support those who've experienced financial abuse is so awesome.
Yes. Yes. I would say from my personal experience, when I went through my divorce, I was the more moneyed spouse. So I didn't have the issue of going through financial abuse. Yes, I went through other types of abuse, and males and females, they experience it in different ways. But I think that I can definitely impart some knowledge that, hey, if I was not the money spouse, what do I do in these types of situations?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mentioned it in the intro, but you are a certified divorce financial analyst and certified financial planner. So
Mhm.
for people listening, I didn't know when I first started this, people would say, oh, a CDFA. And I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. I would nod my head like I knew what that meant. What is a CDFA? What do you do?
Yeah. So the CDFA stands for Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. And it's exactly how it says. It's somebody that does the analytical work in terms of finances when it comes to a divorce procedure. And when we
Y-
say divorce procedure, it's so broad, right? There's so many different types of procedures out there. And we're talking about mediation, contested divorce, a collaborative, litigative, a very broad spectrum.
Yeah. Well, the majority of folks listening here, it is not a collaborative divorce. And very often mediation is not working for a lot of my audience. And finances is one of the trigger issues
Mhm.
for so many. So a lot of times it is the area that brings up so much fear for my clients. One, because they've been kept in the dark and they don't understand their finances. And two, because finances is one of the, I don't know, like spots. I was going to say tender spots, but that's not the right word. But if they poke the financial bear, that their abuser becomes more abusive. And so
Absolutely.
finances carry a lot of fear. And so how is it that you kind of, I guess, within either the CDFA process or as a financial planner, help
Mhm.
survivors feel less fearful?
I would say that depending on the expertise of the CDFA that your client's working with, it's such a broad spectrum because from my experience, when I have dealt with somebody that is a domestic violence survivor, like you said, there's typically other types of abuse in there. And finances is always a contentious subject to discuss
Mhm.
with spouses, right? Because if the other spouse has that mentality to try to want to control one of your clients, typically want to control other aspects of their lives as well, right?
Yeah.
And what is the number one most fought over subject in divorce? Money,
Money.
right? And so it's another way for the other spouse to assert control. And from a CDFA perspective, from a financial perspective, there's different ways to protect yourself. I would say moving forward, and things that we can do, like different strategies or things to just keep in mind to try to mitigate that as much as possible.
Yeah. What are some of the common pitfalls that you do see when you are working on a divorce with a survivor or where there's been financial abuse?
Mhm. I would say that the number one most common pitfall in any type of divorce is underestimating the cost of the divorce process.
Yeah. Oh,
The cost, you know, depending on which route you go, the cost varies drastically, as I'm sure you've seen, right?
yeah.
We've seen thousands of dollars in some cases, all the way up to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
Even right, it's such a broad spectrum, and people think that, oh, our case is very simple. We don't have that many finances. We just want a very straightforward divorce. But that in and of itself costs a couple of $1,000s, right?
Mhm.
In some cases, a couple of $1,000s is a very big drop in the bucket. And so where are we going to come up with this money, right? Especially in the cases where the other spouse has most of the control over where money goes,
Yeah.
right? But I would say one way that I have advised my clients to do in these types of situations is to put aside a emergency bucket, right? Maybe when you're getting some funds every now and then, maybe put away some of those funds into a quote unquote rainy day fund or a preparing for divorce fund.
Mhm.
Because especially if you're going through the divorce process, there is going to be a lot of emotions on the table, right?
Yeah.
You have emotional stress. If you have kids, you have to worry about the kids too. You have to worry about the finances. So I think you need to prepare yourself is what I'm saying when you're going through this process.
Yeah, and I know in my payroll platform, there is a way to kind of create a rainy day fund where it just automatically pulls, 25 bucks or whatever it is out of every paycheck or month, or I don't actually know, I should know these things, but it comes out of the paycheck and automatically goes there, and then it just stays in this account that's
Hmm.
just there.
Yeah,
And so maybe looking into things like that, is there something at your job that you have access to?
absolutely. You raise a great point logistically. So let's dive into that a little deeper. So most payroll companies allow you to distribute a portion of your paycheck to multiple bank accounts.
Mhm.
Technology is getting better. So you might want to speak to your employer and see if they have that capability. And if they do have that capability, then great. Depending on how much income you're bringing in, maybe it makes sense to put away 10% or 5%, whatever you can afford into a fund or into a bank account that's on the side that only you know about, and have it accumulate to a level that you're comfortable with when you're going through this whole divorce process.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I'm thinking about the stay-at-home parents who they actually don't bring money in to the relationship. How can they start to prepare?
I would say it's the same ideology. So if you think about it, let's say you get some money to go to the grocery store, right? Or let's say you have to pay a certain bill. maybe it might make sense to arbitrarily increase the amount that you use for groceries, or arbitrarily increase the funds that are needed to pay for childcare, or, let's say pre-K or something like
Mm-hmm.
that, and start up a little bit of an egg, so that you have enough funds later on. That's your original question on the pitfall, right? This is one of the biggest pitfalls, where
Mm-hmm.
clients don't prepare enough financially, and then they get overwhelmed when they see the bill come later from either an attorney or a mediator for somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The costs are exorbitant. It's so sad that I have a referral for a bankruptcy attorney. That type of referral has to be in a therapist's, back pocket. That's horrible. And it happens in several of, in these
Yeah.
cases sometimes.
Yeah. It's so unfortunate. And it is also somebody that is a referral from my network too.
Yeah.
It's so unfortunate because when you're going through the bankruptcy process, it takes a lot away from you, because you're giving up your credit score, right? It's going to be
Hmm.
really hard for you to get any type of credit from either credit card companies or leases as well, because, landlords nowadays check your credit score, right?
Yeah.
So it's unfortunately, a systematic pressure for people of this background.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad. And I'm thinking of, when a victim has been completely taken out of the financial picture or knowing of what's going on in their family, even just finding the information feels really overwhelming. But what kinds of things? So if they literally know nothing, they don't know how much their partner brings in,
Mhm,
they don't know all the costs of their bills,
mhm,
they don't know where the money comes in, goes out, they know very, very little.
mhm,
What should someone start to acquire information on
mhm,
so that if they're going through a divorce, they can give you this paperwork, right? There's the financial disclosures that come with divorce,
mhm.
which are not accurate a lot of times, right? Money's hidden, bank accounts are not put on there, like stock portfolio, like that's not on there, bonuses aren't on there. And if you don't know anything about the finances of your family,
Mhm.
you are more susceptible to your partner doing those things. So what should someone start to look for and accrue?
Mm, Great question. So I would say the most amount of information with the least amount of work is to gather your tax return.
Mhm.
If you are doing married filing jointly, it might make sense to reach out to the accountant who's doing the taxes and say, "Hey, can you please send me over a copy?" You're
Mhm.
definitely privileged to a copy of your previous tax return because you're on the tax return, right?
Yeah.
So you are, in fact, a client, even though your other spouse is the one communicating with the account. So the tax return gives a CDFA and also whoever's involved a lot of information financially, because at the end of the year, you get a funny little paper from every single institution that you do business with, like
Yeah.
your 401k, your investment account, your bank. They give you a 1099 form or a W-2, something like that, so that you can report everything that you did for the entire year from that institution. And all of that is gathered in one place, the accountant's office, right?
Mhm.
He has to dissect all this information, put it into a tax return. And typically they always have copies of these, right? It's very common for them to have copies of the W-2 and things like that, so that they can show their work when they do the tax return,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's such a treasure trove of information that is going to tell you, hey, where are all these different accounts? Because if an account exists and there is a tax implication in one of the accounts, then you're definitely going to get a 1099, and that's going to be reflected in the tax return.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like the hidden things that so many of my clients find out. And I put out there that, yes, a lot of people are not kosher when it comes to their taxes. So we are aware that sometimes they're hiding those things, right? Maybe they're self-employed. And so they're playing around with things a little bit, but the
Mhm.
tax return will give you a good chunk of information. The
Yeah.
other question I have, because this comes up a ton, when a partner, the abusive partner understands that divorce is looming, separation and divorce is coming,
Mhm.
they start spending money differently or they start doing things differently. How can you show or prove, or what would be needed to show the status quo around money? So, right, these are our typical bills. And then all of a sudden, they're taking out thousands and thousands of dollars to do all these different things.
Sure.
Is that something that a CDFA can help with?
Great question. So this is outside of the purview of a CDFA. A CDFA concentrates mostly on financial planning and the numbers that are presented in front of them so that they can plan for your future during the divorce, after the divorce as well, everything like that. But the analysis that they do is only as good as the numbers that's presented in front of them.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens if there's no numbers presented in front of them? Well, then they can't really do their job, right? So this is where a forensic accountant comes into play. A
Okay.
forensic accountant is the one that will dig through all the different statements to say, hey, this is a discrepancy. Hey, where did this $30,000 go to? Right. And then the other spouse will have to justify to the forensic accountant, oh, I did so and so. I lost in gambling or something. Yeah. Things like
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
Right. The forensic accountant is great at what they do. And they're so specialized in that area where they can look out for things like, oh, there was this time 5 years ago where he took out $15,000, but he didn't tell you. So you need to figure out where that money went. So it goes
Yeah.
somewhere else and you didn't know about it. And essentially it's their job to rediscover or discover assets that might have been hidden away from you as well.
Yeah. I appreciate that because there's so many different people that could be involved in these divorce cases.
Mhm.
And if you're going in blind, you don't even know what could be possible for you.
There are so many different professionals with their own level of expertise. And I think one of the most important things to do when you're going through a divorce is having the appropriate team members
Yeah.
part of your team, right? Everybody has their own area of expertise. And it's great that you can rely on so many different people because there's so many different nuances when you're going through this procedure or process. You know,
Yeah.
like I am in no way, shape, or form a mental health specialist, right? I know all the numbers that are presented in front of me and I can plan for you day in and day out when it comes to numbers, but am I going to know how to dissect, how to approach a certain issue mentally? Gosh, no, no way.
Right.
Right. So I think having the right team is definitely important. And also asking for help is really important, right? From your
Hmm.
own professional, because if you go to a divorce professional and they typically know other professionals. And so if you disclose to your divorce professional your situation, the more information that we get, the more we can help you.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of my goals, I got lots of goals here, but is to help inform and teach and train divorce professionals specifically on the nuances of what it looks like when there's been coercive control and financial abuse and different forms of domestic violence, so that then the right professionals are put in place. Because it's so scary and hurtful when someone explains, they're like, well, I don't know any of the finances, or I haven't been allowed to do anything with finances or whatever. And they're given a really poor reception or poor response to that of like, well, why? Like, that's part of your job. You're an adult, your partners, right? And
Mhm.
so giving people that understanding of like, you're right, there's reasons why they have not been allowed to do X, Y, and Z, or reasons why they allowed their ex-partner to take out credit cards with high interest rates in their name, right? To harm their credit on purpose. So there needs to be that larger level of understanding amongst all divorce professionals. So working on that, slowly working on that.
And you know what? Nobody's perfect, right? Everybody's still trying to learn. There's so many different nuances, like we said,
Yes.
that goes on. And it's so hard to address every single issue that comes up. But the more information that we know, the better, so that we can help as
Yeah.
many clients as possible.
Yeah. And so something that, as you were talking about, kind of the difference between the forensic accounting and what you do with that preparation, most of my audience will find themselves experiencing post separation abuse. So it is not a one and done divorce signed, right? Parenting plan, all good, and we're moving forward and life goes on beautifully. There will be post decree ridiculousness.
Hmm.
And so, what is the role of a CDFA when there is post decree stuff?
Yeah. I would say that you bring up such a great point, because it's very alleviating for people of their background to say that, oh, the divorce is done. They signed the dotted line. We're
Yeah.
good. We're good. But unfortunately, in cases of domestic violence, it's perpetuating sometimes,
Hmm.
right? Where it continues after the divorce. And again, it's going to require some work, not only emotionally, but financially and legally too, right? And in the cases where it doesn't end, you need to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And how a CDFA can add value in that scenario is by setting up a financial plan for them, right? So your clients know their spouse the best, right? So they have to figure out, hey, is my ex-spouse going to pay their fees, or pay their child support, or pay their alimony on time? Or do I not really trust them to that point where they,
The
I'll,
answer
I'll,
is no, you don't trust them.
I'll, well, you can them, that you have to prepare yourself. How do you prepare yourself financially for those situations? Well, it's all about setting up a financial plan then, right? So a very simple 3-step financial plan that I always tell clients that are going through this situation is to separate out your money into 3 distinct buckets. And these are really important buckets. And the first bucket is actually the most important: an emergency fund,
Hmm.
right? So you have to analyze your lifestyle. Number one, you have to figure out how much money is it going to take to support you and your kids every single month. And then multiply that number by 6, right? And what did you just come up with? That's the number that is required for you to make a 6-month emergency fund,
Hmm.
right? Having an emergency fund is going to solve a lot of different issues. Number one, it's going to solve any type of situations that might come up in the short term where, oh, hey, you know what? The heater just broke. It's the middle of winter. What am I going to do? You know, I don't have any money saved. The emergency fund is there to solve for any hiccups along the way. So a emergency fund typically should have at minimum 3 to 6 months worth of necessary expenses on hand in cash at all times,
Hmm.
at all times, right? Now, when I say in cash, that could be in your hand or it can mean in a bank account, a check
Yeah.
or savings account. That's the most important aspect. If you don't have an emergency fund, then there's just so many things that happen in life and you can't really predict what's going to happen in the future. And so the emergency fund is there to solve for any type of short-term issues, right?
Yeah.
Now that's the first bucket. The second bucket is to have a protection bucket. And when I say protection means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To some people, it might mean protection from their ex-spouse. It might mean protection from inclement weather. Protection could also mean protection in the more intermediate term. Hey, what are some of the goals that I have set out after I went through divorce, such as retirement, right? What am I going to do about my retirement now that I've gone through this whole divorce process and it's probably cost the arm and a leg right now?
Hmm.
Rebuild that up and protect my retirement. So for the second bucket, you should always put aside funds as well for that piece. Protection could also mean protection of income as well. What if I get laid off 6 months from now or 2 years from now? Especially for violent survivors in the tech industry, it's very common for engineers to be laid off about a year and a half. Very common. So that second bucket is also very important, protecting against different things. And it's up to you on what this protection means to your clients, and then putting aside the necessary resources for that protection,
Hmm.
right? So let's say hypothetically, I want protection of income. Well, then how much income do you have? Do you make $50,000 a year? If that's the case, then maybe it might make sense to, over time, accrue enough funds for $50,000 just in case you get laid off, so that at least you have enough funds to last you an entire year. So it's like that, right? For the second bucket. Now, the third bucket is really the long-term bucket. What are some of my more long-term goals? It could mean that, hey, 10 years from now, I really want to move out of state. 10 years from now, my kids are going to college. 10 years
Yeah.
from now, I want a certain type of lifestyle. And so you want to separate out enough funds for that bucket too. So it's three important buckets: emergency, protection, and long-term.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that some people listening, that is causing them overwhelm,
Mhm.
or they just stop listening to us. They're like listening, but they're not actually hearing,
Sure.
because that feels so overwhelming of like, I'm literally living paycheck to paycheck and off credit cards.
Mhm. Okay.
How am I expected to save anything?
Okay.
And so how do you help someone that feels that hopeless right now?
Mhm.
That doesn't mean right in the future that you won't be in a different place, but right now that's where they're feeling stuck.
Okay. So I would say it's very important to take a look at the numbers and what you can afford realistically on a month to month basis, right? So take a look at what your highest expense is. Typically it's rent,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Rent is, you know,
Yeah.
because we're in an inflationary environment, rent's always rising wherever you are, wherever,
Yeah. Yep.
you know. So take a look at that. Can I accommodate $1,500 a month for rent? Or is there a cheaper place to live? It might not be as nice as where I am right now, but you know what? It makes sense based on the limited amount of resources that I have, right? It might also be in terms of prioritizing some things that are more important for your family, right?
Yes.
Rent in the area that I'm in right now might be really great for the kids, right? So it might just make sense to just keep that issue on the back end and just stay where I am at because my kids have been accustomed to a certain way of life. His friends are all here. His friends is next door to my kid or across the street, so it's all about prioritization as well. Not everything in life should come down to just dollars and cents. Sometimes
Yeah.
a lot of the times there is that emotional aspect as well, which is something that we shouldn't discount, but we should put it into the plan as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's not just the numbers. It's like, what are you prioritizing right now? Maybe in your divorce decree, you actually can't move
Mhm.
because your kids are in this specific school district. And then that would mean going back to court if you wanted to move outside of this area and all of these things, right? And paying
Mhm.
for your attorney and paying for the motion to be filed and knowing there's going to be a fight. Maybe that's not worth it. And so, yeah, it's like, okay, I am in the container that I'm in right now. This is where I am living.
Mhm.
That's a priority. What are the other areas that I can take a look at? And I think that
Exactly.
the other piece of like really looking and knowing your numbers, people push that away because that feels so scary.
Mm.
And while, yes, it can be scary, it can also be so freeing
Yes.
to just know, like just to
Mhm.
know.
Mhm. Mhm. I would say I've dealt with many cases where numbers is not the forte of my client, right? Which is
Mhm.
why they come to me, right? So that I can
Yeah.
help
Yeah.
them in terms of their finances. It is often overwhelming when we're talking about numbers because unless you go to school for it and unless you do it for a living, typically people just don't want to deal with finances.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I would say that yes, it can be very overwhelming. And, but the best way to overcome that feeling is to address it at a pace that you're comfortable with. So work with a sympathetic financial planner who
Yes.
understands that, hey, it's not a marathon, right? We don't have to solve everything all at once. Maybe it might make sense to solve it bit by bit,
Yeah.
right? Let's do it in steps. Let's do it at a pace that you're comfortable with so that we, number one, have an end goal. And number two, we have a process to get to the end goal.
Mhm.
And sometimes it could be a 6-month process. Sometimes it can be 9 months, right? But take it at a pace you're comfortable with so that you have a plan of action to overcome it and know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel once you're done with everything.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other piece of that fits this audience so well is it takes a lot of time for a survivor to trust someone else, right? Their trust has been very much broken by a lot of different people, not just their partner.
Mhm.
And so having a planner that would give someone time to get to know them, right? It's helpful for you to have all of the information. They're not I'm not right, like, are they gonna trust you to give you all the information? Over time, probably.
Mhm.
Whereas if it's like, "Hey, I'm meeting with you this weekend, we're making our plans, all done," like, that's just not realistic for this kind of population or these people, and so I appreciate that will not only feel less scary, but it will allow you to build trust with that financial planner.
Mhm. Mhm. Absolutely. You raised such a great point where trust takes time.
Mhm.
It's not immediate. Just because even if you signed a retainer with somebody, doesn't necessarily mean that you have their trust.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
going to take sometimes months, and especially people of a certain background who has gone through such a traumatic experience. It's going to take longer to build up that level of trust. And so
Yeah.
it's important for even the financial planner point of view to invest as much time as possible to make sure that our clients feel comfortable to disclose certain things. Sometimes
Yeah.
clients that are coming in right through the door, we need certain documents, but they're hesitant to give certain documents away because of the information on those documents. And so it's important to not push them. Let's take it at their pace that they're comfortable with. And once they're ready to disclose that information, then that's perfectly fine. But sometimes it does come with time. These,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm super excited because I get a lot of financial questions.
Mhm.
And we can't answer, right? All the questions that come up, we could not answer in a single podcast episode. That's just not realistic. So, Jun is doing a workshop with us next week. At the time that this goes live, it will be next week. I am super excited because these questions, you get to be on with us live and ask more nuanced questions about your situation. And so I am really excited for you all to have that opportunity. And Jun, I'm so excited that you're willing to do that for us because it can be really, again, hard to get answers to questions and hard to get answers to those really nuanced questions to know, like, do you need a CDFA? Do you need a financial planner? Are you going to need a forensic accountant instead? And so I am really excited that you're going to be with us next week to answer those questions. Is there anything that people should know about before they show up with all their questions?
I would say bring all the questions that you have. I am happy to help your clients and I'm happy to be a resource. So anyone that you come in contact with, I would say from my personal experience, because I know what it's like emotionally to go through these situations. Let's try to give you as much help as possible and worry about other things later. So bring all the questions that you have. I'm happy to answer them. Right. And if you
Yes.
have any follow-up questions, ping Sybil or I, and we'll talk it out.
Yeah.
Right.
And how, if someone does, like they listen to this, they can't wait for, they have a question, they just can't wait to go to the workshop that we're running next week. How can they get in touch with you?
So feel free to shoot me over an email. It's jun.team at fidariwealth.com, FIDARE wealth.com. I would say that feel free to just ping me. I don't charge for any type of advice when it comes to domestic violence survivors. So, just think of it as a safe space. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm happy to help.
Yep. And if you were driving, you are, taking something out of the oven right now, you're doing bath time with your kiddo, that email will be in the show notes so you can access that. And then you all know that you can always access me. And if you have a specific question for Jun, then I will get it to them. You can always email me at info@risingbeyondpc.com. Jun, thank you. Thank you. And I hope to see so many of you next week. We will answer as many questions as we can answer.
Yes. And again, feel free to ask anything, but if you do have situations where you don't want it to be answered in a public forum, feel free to ping Sybil or I privately, and we'll try to help you as much as we can.
Absolutely. This is why you're in my referral network. And I'm so glad to have met you because survivors need support, not just from therapists, not just from divorce coaches. We need support all around, wraparound support so that they can be successful after they've left.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate what you said. It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, getting to know you and working with you over time because the clients that we work with need resources. They need help. And we just want to be able to help as many people as possible. That's the goal, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we hope to see you next week and I appreciate you all. So I will catch you on the next episode of the Rising Beyond podcast.